Hi Tay. Without loss of generality, Mochi and I would like to talk about affordances. The term affordance comes from evolutionary theory, and it means how do organisms make sense of all of the information that's coming into their senses and determine what thing could afford them shelter or afford them something to eat or afford them a way to avoid predators. It's a way of reducing information to just what's useful for that organism.
For humans, this piece of metal is useful for baking cake, but for a cat, it may hold water. A grocery store is like a modern forest or savanna. There are lots of food options, but people seek out options that taste good to them and ignore food they don't like. Vegans skip the cheese counter and dairy aisle, while paleo nuts avoid grains and beans because, caveman science? How do people sort through the alphabet soup of supplements? They filter out cures that don't help their ailments. Some people find utility in objects that smell good when burnt, while I could otherwise pass right by. I only need new pants and socks, so I see a small portion of this store is useful. Storefronts telegraph their affordances to passersby. This cafe is a good date and Instagram spot. This food truck has no frills and is all about feeding you. This stretch of asphalt was originally designed as a parking spot, but thankfully others thought it would afford a good spot to sit. Racks of wine have no more affordance for me, based on my last video. Loops of metal in the sidewalk can either lock up bikes or dogs. These plants look like a great place for a dog to mark, but the neighbors see it as decoration instead. Paths and hidden stairways act as affordances for people trying to get from A to B. Animals see, smell, hear, taste a whole universe that humans don't know about, because our lineage didn't find that information necessary to survive. People find hills advantageous for different reasons: spotting the enemy, sending radio signals, getting a workout in, or selfies. And if you're gay, the bar on the left will have a larger affordance for finding a mate, as will spending time in certain neighborhoods.
I'll give two more examples that are closer to home. One is with scientific studies where you're typically recording many variables over many subjects, and because it's a high-dimensional space, it's actually pretty easy to find patterns in the data. Depending on your affordance, whether you're looking for novelty or some correlation, you could find outliers that indicate novelty, or you could find a trend line that indicates correlation. But you have to make sure you don't fool yourself with just random fluctuations in the data instead of a real signal. Another example is life in Bangkok, where there are lots of restaurants available, lots of coffee shops, lots of bars, lots of things to do. So how do you decide what to do? Well, I've noticed that locals and foreigners view that same set of information differently. They have different affordances. So Westerners may be more likely attracted to coffee shops that look like Brooklyn, nice and clean, whereas a local might want, traditional Thai coffee from the soy, and the kind of Thai pub that locals will go to has a very different feel and look than some Irish pub that the Farang will go for. You could describe this just as preference, but really I think it's slightly more accurate to talk in terms of affordance. What niche the person actually wants to occupy, and what evolutionary gain they can use it for. So you might still be asking, why is this concept useful? Why does John care about it? And I think the reason is that it really sharpens how I view other people's decisions. There is so much information available to us, and we see many different behaviors manifest based on the same information. And I think a good explanation is that people are conditioning on that information in different ways. And in the end, the idea of an affordance is itself an affordance. It helps me reduce all the various information in the world into something more understandable. And maybe that's why I like it. Until next time, Tay.